on reports and articles on green schoolyards implemented in Europe, North America, mostly Europe and North America. So quite Eurocentric in a way. Although I believe there is a lot we could learn from the Global South. So, and here I just want to bring a few of the insights of the key messages. It's huge literature, like a lot of pages. So I did this preparation work as a kind of to warm up for the Cool Schoolyard project. So what are the key issues? One of the first issue has to do, first of the barrier and also enabler for the green schoolyards has to do with funding. For example, one research that surveyed more than 70 schoolyards in the Netherlands was saying that 4/5 of the schoolyards wouldn't be implemented unless there was kind of public body involved in the funding. So that's one fundamental factor, the funding. But then the second big issue that emerges in most of the reports has to do with the way the multiple stakeholders interact. I don't know, it's a little bit of small font. I'm not sure you were able to kind of read it well. So many kind of studies find that managing green schoolyard in a centralized way doesn't really work out. You need to put different actors to work together at different stages of development. For example, another study that's kind of reviewing 70 schoolyards across Europe found that the schoolyards that were most successful, and by successful means ones that managed to endure over time and are used in a very kind of wide sense at the level of the schools, are the ones that have multiple stakeholders involved throughout the entire time. Yet, involving multiple stakeholders is sometimes problematic because often certain stakeholders, like the children who don't have the power to articulate their message very often, may be put aside, and the ones who eventually take the decisions about how the schoolyard would look like are most often the administration, to some extent the school authority, and there is the temptation to consult the children at the very initiation of the planning process, and that has to do with so I'm moving to the next point that has to do with participation, which is in a way subsection of the decision-making power and decision-making processes. So while we have seen that there is dialogues and there is a lot of participation going on, participants don't always tend to, especially children, don't always, in all cases, seem to find that what they wish is actually reflected in the final design. And here I'm going to tell you one story. Well, that's from a US schoolyard in Boulder, Colorado, where, for example, a few articles have been written about this case of renovating a schoolyard, which is next to a park, and the children have been involved very heavily in the whole process of reconstruction, including they have been serving inspirational examples, they have been collaborating a lot with the designers, and eventually they said that what mattered most for them was the process of designing and the process of preparing. But what happened afterwards is that, as mostly happens in other green schools, is that the implementation took place over the summer when children were not there. So, and also took place in a very rushed framework. The money had to be spent, it had to be finished by the beginning of the year, that should not be dirty, etc. So what happened then is that in this critical moment of implementing and taking final decisions of how the whole schoolyard should look like, the final users did not really participate and so they came back, they were kind of disappointed that it didn't reflect at least to an extent, their aspirations, their imagination, and didn't contribute to the quality of play that they had earlier. So actually that made many, and they were saying, okay, we are very happy and we learned a lot from the process of creation. That's actually what stays with us. So basically to say that we should not underestimate the process of designing as an educational process, integrate that into the very pedagogy. And I mean, that has happened. That's an example that happened a couple of years ago, let's say 10 years ago, and there is a lot to learn from there, and then the practices have improved over time. What else do you want to say here? Kind of also a lot of studies find that that the involvement of parents is an important success factor in the sense of contributing to, at the level of implementation. For example, in the Netherlands, in some projects, parents have been involved in different phases of construction together with the children, which also has created a lot of educational opportunities for children, and also has created a sense of ownership. And that's another important category that needs to be taken into consideration, because when your family or when you have been involved in, I was speaking like with someone about that, in planting the tree and planting something or creating this particular type of construction, it's more your own, and then you play with it in different way, take care of it in different way. So participation. So, and therefore some authors were saying, okay, in order to really integrate the point of children and all the participative process that was there in the beginning, you perhaps can try to do some sort of prototyping. For example, give yourself the time to develop the green schoolyard, to not do it in a rushed way. Have a little example. For example, place it somewhere in the schoolyard, and then see how it interacts, see how children play with it, see what feedback you get, and then expand. So it's kind of gradual stage of development rather than just like going large scale all at once. Then another theme that was emerging very clearly has to do with the way we tend to perceive nature, and what is actually green, and what is a good green schoolyard. And because very often, for example, the green schoolyards that I was looking up in the literature tend to have this tendency to be kind of orchestrated nature, nicely neat, arranged nature, controlled nature that you could that doesn't have a lot of loose parts. That's kind of very neat, very orderly. And at the end, on the other hand, a lot of what comes very much from pedagogies, alternative pedagogies, and also cognitive development studies find that it's exactly these loose, messy parts like leaves, branches, weeds, things that that look like rubbish, or things that we don't really match our sense of aesthetics and sense of beautification, but these are the ones that give a lot of play, give actually infinite possibilities of play and creating imagination for the children. So it's kind of, so this is why some reports have been saying, well, we need to provide space for this messy nature, because actually it's providing a lot of opportunities for cognitive development, for emotional development, for play, for interacting, for constructing different imaginaries. And then this somehow related to the people, to the professionals who constructed the green schoolyards, because some studies would think, don't employ professional gardeners, because they come and they trim everything, although you need them, because you need the people who maintain and actually design and maintain the spaces need to have a view not only of kind of mainstream gardening, but also of ecology, a kind of wide notion of ecology, but also of pedagogy, to know a little bit about play nature. So it's kind of, the maintenance has to be done with a thought, in a way that a lot of, I mean, Sigrun, you were commenting on that, like leaving a lot of branches, leaving these elements that you want to clean away, because they are so rich in texture and it's kind of and provide a lot of opportunities for play. So that's something that was emerging a lot. Then the issue of maintenance, we spoke a lot about that, I mean, in a sense, but it literally is, yeah, maintenance, for example, the directors of some schools that have been interviewed was saying all that we were focusing so much on the design that when it got completed, we were just like, wow, and what do we do about maintenance? And maintenance comes immediately, and it's not something that you could easily organized. And there are different configurations. We were speaking with Jan in the break, in between, about the importance of organizing, let's say, someone in the school who's kind of maintaining the work, or reshuffling budgets in order to incorporate it in the budget, or some schools organizing into the parental committees that do the maintenance, but also, let's say 50% of the maintenance in many of the schools that I was looking at was done by the concierge. Concierge, I'm not sure. Well, yeah. So it's kind of a lot of the responsibility is actually falling on these less visible people in the schoolyards that are not teachers, that are not directors, and they do everything, and they're sometimes overcharged, and they have not been part of the vision. So it's interesting. I think we need to also think how we include this type of less visible people who actually end up doing all the work in the end. Okay, and a third point is the importance of integrating the green schoolyards in the school curriculums. We spoke a lot about that. But still, if you look at the empirical reports and look at the literature, what actually happens is that very small fractions of the schools actually integrate authentically the green spaces in their school curriculums. I mean, very few of the teachers use the newly naturalized green schoolyards in their daily practices. And mostly, one of the reasons for that has to do with not having sufficient training. For example, feeling insecure about how you can organize, not feeling that you can control the group, that the group might go all over the place, and just like not being used to that. But others who have the skills, they feel that their work is actually not valued sufficiently by the school inspectorates. Basically, so we have to situate the green schoolyards within an educational system that's very numerically oriented, that's very much oriented towards achievement according to particular very narrow criteria. And teachers are very stressed in terms of time. So it's actually an educational system, but it's about making productive students and then producing productive people. So everything has to be very fast. You have to learn and reproduce large volumes of material, and everything is very numerically measured. So all the benefits of outdoor teaching and teaching in the green spaces are not tangible, they're invisible, they're more qualitative. And inspectors, they can't capture that. So then teachers, when they see that they do all this effort and then it's not valued, why should they do that? Why should they bother? So that's kind of another important thing of, again, we were speaking with Jan about the importance of lobbying the inspectors, the educational system, and the way teaching, all the pressure that's actually put on teachers in order to produce particular type of people with particular type of knowledge, no, in a sense. So these were some of the findings. Here I have a few more. Well, just a little bit wanted to more expand on the importance of having loose parts and messiness in the design of the green schoolyards. Simply because according to the theory of loose parts, it is just elements like branches, twigs, sand, mud, leaves that stimulate creative play behavior, and the cognitive development of children is actually really stimulated most. So this is kind of something I wanted to zoom in a little bit further, but I already spoke about that. Some gray areas, some areas that are kind of there, but there is a lot more research that needs to be done. And first one is the role of the local community. There is not so much reports or literature on the role of local communities in the greening, but some papers have started, some researchers have started to evaluate the role of local community and neighborhood now in the context of COVID. Because imagine if we are entering an epoch, a period of time when we're going to have more travel restrictions, the role of what they have found is the role of greening in kind of schoolyards could be really important, because for some neighborhoods that could be the closest by contact with nature that children could have. And for example, they have found that, this is a study from the UK, that when children are coming back from lockdowns or let's perimeter or some kind of travel restrictions, they had problems to concentrate, they had problems to learn, and when they had frequent or let's say more routine kind of contact with greened schoolyards, they were able to concentrate more. Their attention actually was much kind of better, was much higher. And in that sense, kind of the role of green schoolyards at the level of the neighborhood becomes even more important in the context of health pandemics, regardless of the fact that we're going to have more of them or not. But it's important to be prepared also from the kind of inclusion of these neighborhoods that have less greens. Other reports were talking about the importance of the danger of technofying the greening, in the sense of introducing the greening in a very prescriptive way without proper participation process as a kind of something that must be done without proper reflection, or is in a way of, or in a business scenario, let's say, kind of inviting a company to do all the work for you. That's kind of typical technofying of nature as something aesthetic out there, which you don't interact with, but it's a must. So it's kind of, we should not put it as the next, introduce greening as the next, in a very fascist way, you know, it should be done in a very participative manner, in a sense. Then there is kind of not so much literature on the importance of policy embeddedness, but it's very clear that these schoolyards that are developed in, or green schoolyards that are developed in policy vacuum don't last very long, or they have issues with maintenance, or they kind of struggle to survive. So it's kind of embeddedness in local municipal policy. It's really important. And then what was this kind of the development of teacher trainings. I spoke a little bit with that, but there is also kind of not so much report or research on the importance of, on the role of providing additional training for teachers and the way that might change the, let's say, the mindset, the educational mindset, and the use of the green spaces. But that's kind of one big potential that needs to, and a process that needs to go along in parallel with the rewildering of the schoolyards. And then, when it comes to outdoor teaching, some researchers and reports would argue that actually you need to think about that at the level of the design. So if you want to teach outside, you need to integrate and think about that in advance strategically, not just like organize the space and then think how you could do some teaching in there. Because for teaching you need a little bit more quieter space, you need places to sit. So you need to kind of think about that outdoor learning component long in advance. And then a further kind of perhaps more global aspect that also emerged in the literature has to do with let's say the larger contribution of green schoolyards, let's say, to socio-ecological transition or to social transformations. Because like in there we have so in the sense of thinking of green schoolyards, not only as green schoolyards, but as spaces where different type of culture, way of being, way of thinking, way of relating with others could be nurtured, let's say. Let's say place where you could reflect upon consumerism, you can reflect about the current system that we live through, the current government, like the current political system. I mean, reflect about also global issues, because there it's very experiential, and from that experiential part with nature and how nature is affected and how we live it through our body, very often we could easily connect with the process of social transformation. So it's kind of, some studies are actually going in this direction. So look, when we study and when we implement green schoolyards, we need to think of the global implementation about like how do we move towards society that's kind of more ecologically, more sustainable, less commercialized, right? So that's something that came up, and very importantly, something that Francesc was speaking in the morning, the issues of justice and accessibility. So what's emerging a lot in some studies, that these schools, which are more in socially deprived neighborhoods, were not really able to find the resources to apply for different programs. This is happening in different places of Europe or also in the US. And also, normally, and this is a study by Kuo and colleagues, but from 2019-18, in the US, and they basically find that the schools that are located in, let's say, more unprivileged neighborhoods of color, are typically less green and having less green elements. So, but at the same time, there is quite some indication that the greening could actually have even bigger impact on underprivileged individuals, children, girls and boys, than on, let's say, more well-off. Simply because the children that are growing in these underprivileged areas, as we were rightly saying earlier, have less access with nature. They live more into kind of, let's say, polluted areas, or let's say paved areas. So then the importance of the connection with so sometimes the kind of unique contact with nature might be from the contact with the schoolyard. So in that sense, the role of justice has to be kind of really considered very seriously. And then there's a couple of studies on green interventions in poor areas of Chicago, let's say schools which have 90% Latinos or African Americans, and they have done naturalization process there, and they found incredible change in the behavior, because like this is schools with high level of violence, high level of gang, high level of, let's say, bullying. So they found that after naturalization took place, there was less gang activities, more positive social interactions, and also students were able to concentrate more, because there's a lot of research on saying how the access with greening, observing greening and interacting with greening actually contributes to attention and to academic achievement. So that in that sense, it's really important to foster greening in this in underprivileged part of town. And in terms of justice, and I've put gender here, and it already was coming up across, but a lot. But it's really impressive how gender roles are really challenged or changed and transformed with naturalization, and how much school naturalization actually changes. So, like many studies find that before the naturalization process, you would see boys doing competitive games of various kinds and taking a lot of space, and girls being less active and observing in different parts, let's say, but not taking space, staying in the corners. So after the naturalization processes, you could see how these roles change, and how in the greened areas, girls and boys are more like starting to interact more. Girls are becoming more active, more empowered, more capable of taking, more interested in starting kind of various games with various rules, creative games, and so you could see how the roles change, and how the type of space that that different genders occupy is actually changing as a result of the greening. So when, and here is just one first preliminary idea of how and when can we call a green schoolyard a success. So here I have 2 minutes, okay. So when the maintenance is there, when there's good management in the maintenance, when there is curriculum, when it's integrated in the school curriculum, when it's participation but the different stages of teachers, of children, not only at the level of the design, but also the level of implementation, the level of evaluation as well. When there is diverse and non-orchestrated nature, messy parts, which actually there is ecological consideration, when environmental justice is considered, basically that the space contributes to the inclusion of people from various ethnic backgrounds, and when they contribute somehow to broader social transformation, let's say. And final thing, what are we going to do in cool schools? Our plan is to study, let's say, about 5 schools in Barcelona, perhaps 3 in Brussels, and we're going to see about Paris. It's all in the making, and we're going to look at the collaborative arrangement that contributed to the development of the green schoolyards, what worked well, what didn't work so well, why, how could it be improved, which were the barriers, how are these barriers kind of surpassed, how is maintenance configured, what are the invisible blind spots of maintenance, and how the green space is used. Is it integrated in the school curriculum, and is it related somehow to the wider policy framework, the accessibility at the level of the neighborhood, and in a way the larger contribution of green schoolyards to societal transformation. But this is preliminary. The research questions might keep evolving, but this is what we have for the time being. And that's here. Yeah, thank you. It was too long. Sorry, I spoke too much. Yeah.
It's also figuring some more space. It's really helpful. And I think it's important to also comment that there were a lot of problems in the COVID time behind the doors, and when you open the gates of the schoolyards and give some green spaces for families, it can help also for the mental and also physical health. And another thing, we also had a short movie, and I would like to show it if it's possible, maybe by email or maybe here, I don't know. But many things you told, we experienced in the practice, and it's nice to show it maybe with also the story of the children and the teachers. But many things were really interesting and nice. Thanks. No question.
I can't agree more on the COVID thing. It's kind of, there is little literature about that, but it's kind of, you could see that green spaces in schoolyards have been fundamental for the well-being of children and for their health.
Someone else? If you give it to me, I will ask something. But maybe Mama will kill me. About gentrification, we didn't talk about it, no? If you make some nice patios, some nice schoolyards, then people with a higher level of acquisition moved to the area to be able to have their children there. And then the children who were talking, they move to other areas, no? Because it's too expensive. Well, it's just a remark. I didn't pretend to ask nothing.
That's a fundamental remark, I think. So this is why it's important to distribute greening across the entire city, and especially pay attention to those neighborhoods that are most deprived and start from there. But I agree, gentrification needs to be considered, absolutely. Like this is the work of the Lab for Urban Environmental Justice that I've been kind of part of over the last 8 years. So we are looking at green gentrification in Barcelona, Europe, and the US. And I have here Francesc, Baró, and Galia that are working on Shorky, that are working green gentrification, can tell a lot about that. So if you want, you can speak about that in the break.
Okay, well, yes, just one thing. Bueno, only a reflection that those invisible people that you talk about maintenance, that most of the time are overcharged, no? With the transformation in the maintenance of the schoolyard, maybe they have to be involved in the participation process, no? And maybe we should listen to them before the transformation about how difficult is the maintenance, no, on the schoolyard, because most of the time we invite families, children when it's a good participation, or educators, but not those people who are taking care every day, no, of those spaces. So it should be interesting to invite them in the participation process.
No, just another thing. If we can consider the concept of schoolyard, including the space nearby the school, the impact that you described in your presentation would be enormous in terms of social cohesion, justice, etc.
Yeah, there is this hypothesis, and it's not very well proved, that actually improving the schoolyards and the surrounding could really contribute strongly to neighborhood cohesion. But there is the literature is not very ample on that, but it's kind of, there's just 1 or 2 studies, but absolutely my hypothesis is that's going to be really, really important for neighborhood cohesion and reducing violence as well.
They're asking for another question. I think. I just want to thank you to talk about teachers and curriculum, because we are giving them a tool, a new tool, which is a new space, a new concept of space, open space, green space, and they don't know how to manage, how to teach, and how to deal with all the new opportunities that these spaces have for them and for their students. So we need to be aware that training is basic, but not only for students, but for teachers. It's absolutely necessary. It's just thank you for putting this aspect in the list.
No, it's emerging very clearly in many of the studies. It's kind of, yeah, I think it's, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks to you, Maria, because I think it's a good point that, and you are working in that, and a lot of people here is working in that. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Filka. I think it's so interesting, and we need 2 days more, I think, minimum, to continue speaking and speaking. But yeah, thank you, and I think that we can. Thank you.